Welcome back to Leggari, everyone. I'm Tyler. This video is going to show you how you can save thousands in your home or business by installing a Leggari countertop kit. Don't replace it, resurface it. So I'm going to go over how to tape your edges before we apply the Leggari Stone Kit. You can see back here I've already taped our edges. We're taping high, and don't worry about the tape not sticking or peeling the primer off because it's going to bond no matter what. Even if we go on it tacky, when we pull that tape it's not going to peel up. So we're going to be using painter's tape, yellow. It's 1.88 inches wide, and what I'm going to do is pull strips out, tape about half of it above the counter and half of it onto the face. And it looks a little bit like this. So I like to pull it out, and then I'll twist this, tighten it up, and then now I can gauge where I want it. And if I put it wrong, I can pull it back off, get it right where I want it, and then press that in. Now we're going to do another strip. Try to keep it the same height or similar. Once we got that done, now we really want to press this in nice and tight on the face. Get our corners good. We want to create a nice tight seal so that resin doesn't bleed under the tape and start leaking off the counter. And then the last thing we're going to do is just put your finger in the corner and just pinch it. It'll create a little more tension on the tape. And that's how you tape off to do our Leggari Stone Kits. So Tim will mix up the product, and then I'll show you guys how to apply it next.
All right, guys, I'm gonna mix up this Leggari Stone Kit for Tyler. Very easy kit. Seems like there's a lot of components to it, but there's really not once we start mixing it. So we have 4 adamantiums, we have a dark mercury, a midnight pearl, and then our famous white Leggari effects, the extremely potent effects that reacts with the epoxy. So we're gonna use a 3-gallon kit of our Leggari metallic epoxy, our countertop, and we're gonna split this into 6 different batches. So what I'm first gonna do is mix up the 3-gallon kit. I'm gonna mix it in 2 different buckets. We call it a primary mixing bucket and then a secondary mixing bucket. I'm gonna mix it for about a minute and a half, moving the drill up and down. up and down in the bucket. And then I'm going to transition it over into another brand new bucket and mix it for another about 30 seconds. And if you do that, you'll never have another soft spot again on any counter, any floor. That's something that we teach, that's something that we do. Have not had a soft spot in probably 8 years. These containers are absolutely phenomenal. They're the easy pour containers, but notice with the handle, if you turn them over too fast like I did, sometimes the epoxy can get set up. There's actually been some comments on YouTube, comments always comical to read through, that says, well, why don't you just get rid of the container so you don't deal with that in the handle? Well, these are the best containers on the market, so we would rather deal with the handle than have an inferior bucket. They're a lot thicker than just about any other container out there. But yeah, there's a lot of surface area on the inside, but we don't want them to break in transit. We want them to be easy to pour small increments out. A lot of epoxy is shipped in big, gallon paint cans. It's hard to scrape out. They're just a pain in the butt. So we opted to use the easy pour containers, and we feel like they're the absolute best containers you can get. You'll notice when I start mixing that I'm going to use this larger paddle wheel on an electric drill. And then when I mix the metallics in the smaller batches, I'll use this smaller paddle. Now, when I'm mixing the metallic epoxy up, I'm not worried about inducing air into it. So a lot of people are worried about that. With most epoxies, you're correct. You do need to worry about inducing too much air. It's going to be a little bit thicker material. They don't have as many bubble mitigating components in it that'll help release the bubbles. So yes, with other types of epoxies, you are correct. You want to submerge the drill, go very low speed. You don't want to induce very many bubbles into the mix. With our mix, guys, it's not a problem. By the time we're done with this counter, it's going to look glass smooth. I don't care if I put 1,000,000 bubbles in this thing. So now what I'll do, I'm just waiting for these containers to go from a steady stream to a drip. So when these containers just start dripping, then I'm pretty much done. You can leave these upside down for 5, 10, 15 minutes if you'd like. That's fine. I'm not really worried about it. We're going to get plenty of epoxy out, but of course get as much out as you can. But notice it's starting to drip, so I'm satisfied with that. Our epoxy is a 2-to-1 ratio, so what I poured in there were the 2 part A's, and then we have 1 part B, which is the hardener or the catalyst to make it set up. So now that I have the part A's in here, I'm going to pour in the hardener, and same thing. This is much more fluid. It's going to pour out much quicker. All right, starting to get to some fine drips. So now, let's mix this. All right, now I'm going to pour it into a brand new bucket. I like kind of answering some of the YouTube comments we get. Another comment we get frequently is, basically, don't listen to these guys. It's just another product off the shelf. That is false. It's not another product off the shelf, although there is some truth in that, in the fact that a lot of products that are out there in the world that tote themselves as some of the best epoxy in the world, it's just another white labeled product. There's probably 20 other companies out on the market, big and small, that probably have the same product, and they just switch the labels out. They call that white labeling. This is not one of those products. We work with chemists specifically. We change up the formula to make it better. We're constantly developing it, like any good manufacturer does. They sit down, they talk to the chemist, they work through what issues are you having, what do you want to make better, what do you want to fix, what would you like to see more of. And we've been developing this for literally years, guys. So that's why we're so proud of it, and it's also why I feel the need to mention that. is that no, it is not another off-the-shelf product. I can say with full confidence, I've sat down personally with these chemists, with Tyler, and for years have been developing this exact formula. It's the only one like it on the market in the world. All right, now we have mixed epoxy. Again, I'm gonna tout the product a little bit. You don't wanna leave it in the bucket forever, but we probably have more working time and more pot life than just about any product on the market like this. So I'm not gonna get real stressed out about rushing and then screwing a bunch of stuff up. What I will do is separate all of the epoxy into these 6 containers. We'll add the metallics, mix them in, then make our dirty pour batches. We'll be off to the races. You can see how easy it is. You just mix all the epoxy up together, split it up, and then we'll add our metallics. You're gonna add around 60 ounces to all of these. We just wanna make it pretty even. Now I'm gonna scrape this out and try to make it hit in the bucket here. I am thoroughly prepared to make a mess. It's like what we teach here at Leggari. Just mentally prepare for the mess. It's gonna get messy. You know, you'll be all right. I got plastic down. Wow, that's not that bad. Look at us, go team. And I keep a spray bottle of denatured alcohol and just a wash rag around, just to keep the area clean, just because, you know, sometimes I deal with a little bit of that OCD, keeping stuff clean, that's fine, okay? So I'm gonna take the metallics, I'm gonna pour it into each of these buckets, and then I'm gonna mix it. Now, a little trick of the trade is if you start at the lightest color and work your way to the darkest color, you don't need to clean your drill off. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start at the adamantium, then we're gonna mix up the dark mercury, and then the midnight pearl. I'm going to wear a mask, even though we're in a massive warehouse. You wanna wear a mask, you don't wanna be breathing metallics, even if you could do this like outside in your backyard, so you don't get metallics in the air in your house or in the building you're working in. It's a good habit to get into. Okay, now we have all these mixed in. Now comes the fun part. This is where we make more messes. Put out another 6 containers. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take the Leggari effects. I'm going to shake those up really well. I'm going to put those in the bottom of 4 containers. split this evenly, a little bit in each one until I run out. All right, Leggari effects are out. You're gonna absolutely love these. Now in these other ones, I'm just gonna put a little bit of black. I'm just gonna create a layer of black in the bottom of that. Put a layer of black in the bottom of that as well. Now I'm just gonna go to town. Now I want every color in every bucket. Even though the bottoms will end, even though these containers will end differently, we want every color in every container, and that'll make more sense when Tyler starts doing it. So let's just pour some gray. Well, this is the adamantium, would be the actual color. And what we're gonna do is lots of little batches. And what that's going to cause is a lot of mixture within these buckets. Do a little bit of the dark mercury. I'm just gonna put it in every container, and you'll notice when I'm pouring it in, it starts to mix. You'll notice this a lot more when it gets fuller. Put a little bit of the Midnight Pearl in there. This is like our black. There's one container of adamantium done. Let's just continue. Okay, now you can really start to see how it mixes when I pour a little bit more in. See how it just circulates within that container? That's what we're looking for. We want that to happen a lot. A little more dark mercury. And if I pour it just on one side, it'll pull the color to that side. It'll pull the mix to that side. Create this little vortex in there. Even how you pour these containers in will change the look of it. It's amazing. You can do all the same colors and pour them in these buckets 5 different ways, and you'll have 5 different looks. So if you can tell, this is going to be a very adamantium-esque silver toned counter. Now I'm going to do some dark mercury, and I'll pour a ribbon in the middle of them. Give a little bit of a dark undertone to some of that adamantium in the counter when it gets poured out. There'll be a lot of fluctuations in color. And then I'm just gonna empty it in these 3. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour some black, a little bit of black right here in the ones we started with, and then I'm gonna save this for the very top, and I'm going to finish off this last adamantium. Now I'm going to take the Midnight Pearl, just going to put a ribbon across the top of these. Hopefully when he pours that out, that's some of the first that comes out of the bucket. So I got black in the bottom of the last 2, and now black in the top of these 3, the Midnight Pearl. All right. There you have it. Now we'll give this to Tyler. He's going to show you an awesome technique, a new technique, which I'm sure after this you'll start seeing on a lot of other channels, because remember, you saw it here first.
All right, guys, I got the Leggari Stone Kit ready to go. If you guys have a certain design or look you're going for, you can always map it out with like a Sharpie, create your design on the counter. You can always mock it up before on a piece of paper, draw out your kitchen cabinets, whatever you guys are coating, kitchen counters, and then draw the design, and then you can recreate it on here. We just take a Sharpie, kind of map it out, and that gives you something to follow as you're pouring it out. I'm gonna kind of just go random with this and wing it, and it's gonna look beautiful. That's the benefit of the stone kits. They're simple. Doesn't matter how you apply them, they're gonna look absolutely beautiful. So we'll just get started. So Tim has me, I wanna say 4 with the Leggari effects in them first. So I'll start out with one of those, and I wanna make sure I'm getting white all throughout the counter. So when you're doing these stone kits, as you're pouring it out, kind of take note of the colors that are coming out. You don't want to have mostly white here and you don't have much white back here. So you want to kind of jump around, and you guys will see me do that. So we'll get started here. I'm going to go for more of just kind of a subtle pattern, some soft curves, stuff like that. So pouring out, first you're going to get a lot because it's full. So I like to try to pour small in the beginning. I started here with one of the buckets. You can see we got some of that black in there. So I want to start on the other counters right off the bat and get some black in these as well. Now that I'm getting towards the bottom of this one, I'm going to pour next to this guy. So it's kind of just figuring out the colors that are coming out and kind of jumping around the counter. See, now we're getting more of that gray, which is right here. So I don't want to pour another gray one next to that. So I can maybe jump back over here, get some gray tones out through this one. All right, so I want to get a little more white pop, and we're not getting a lot of white. So I'm going to take our other Leggari effects that came in the kit, and I'm going to add some drops into the top of a few of these buckets, and you can kind of watch me do it. So we got 2 buckets left, so I want to start being a little bit more precise with how I pour these out. So I don't want to be pouring big beads where it's close. This is going to wind up touching, so I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to just try to pour in between a lot of these spots. And by the time we come back, they'll start to fill in. That should be enough on that one. So we got about a half a bucket, and we just kind of keep going around. These are gonna be awesome looking counters when we're done. So I'm just gonna keep filling stuff in, adding a little white as needed. You can add even more if you want. You just wanna make sure you're jumping around before you run out of that white, so you can get it all over the counters. And this is more of a subtle design than some of our other stone kits, just by how we're kind of pouring out, softer patterns, stuff like that. And then I'll kind of show you guys how we can create a wider path, a bead. We're gonna pour it out on some cardboard, and I'll go around in these spots and just fill these in. All we're gonna do, pour a little bit out. We're gonna let that come off the board. All right, so all I'm doing is just getting the rest out of these buckets with the cardboard. I'm just gonna kind of do the same thing. Again, I'm following the patterns that I have out here, but it's gonna create some really cool effects in the surface. So I'll just grab the leftover buckets I got, finish it off, so I'm using all the resin. All right, guys, these are looking really cool. So next thing we're gonna do, I got all the resin dumped out. I scraped it with the cardboard, but look at these cool effects it creates once it starts stringing out. Really, really cool. So if you guys like that more of a subtle look, you don't have to do the cardboard necessarily, but once we disperse the surface, this is gonna look absolutely beautiful. So now we're gonna work on making sure everything is coated. Like if you come over here, we have some spots that haven't leveled out exactly. There's plenty of resin there. So I'm just gonna kind of push my hands in here, help slick that surface off with epoxy, and then it's gonna help it level out. Same thing with the back edges, make sure I get up on the tape. Just kind of hit it all randomly. Make sure we're up on that tape edge. So again, guys, anywhere that might not have got leveled out, we're just kind of feathering those in. Like we got a big spot back there. Just gonna push this resin around, and then that's gonna let it level out easy. And I could even get a little resin out of the cups and pour there if I wanted to. All right, so we're gonna disperse the surface with isopropyl, small to medium drops. And then about 5 minutes later, I'm gonna just mist it with denatured alcohol, and that's gonna make this thing lay out glass smooth. It's really cold in our warehouse, so when it's cold, the resin doesn't wanna lay out as glass smooth, so that denature really helps. And you can see everywhere we did the cardboard design, that's where all the bubbles are. So we basically created those, and since the resin's sticky and starting to set up, those aren't gonna self-pop. So once we spray this, those should pop. I'm gonna wear a mask. If you guys are spraying this inside, make sure you guys are wearing a mask, denatured, isopropyl, any of those type of chemicals. All right, so I'll pop some of those bubbles. When I spray the denatured on it, it's gonna make all them bubbles that are actually really sticky resin is actually gonna pop it really fast. And I'll show you guys that next. We did the dispersing to help model out a lot of the white, right? And kind of blend in some of these veins. But notice how random this was, how natural it looks, really subtle, really cool. And you can see all those cool spots where we used the cardboard at. So say you guys wanted to add a little more white and you had some left, or the Leggari effects, you can just add that by getting it on, just dripping it out and kind of just blending that in with your finger. And I'll kind of show you how you can do that. All right, so you can see we got quite a bit of white up front, not much in the back here. So I'm just gonna take the Leggari effects and kind of just get a little bit out there and just kind of blend it around. Maybe a little bit right through here. Again, it doesn't take much to get some white out in the tops. And then if you guys have any maybe spots that look like a half circle of a bead that was poured out, you can just blend those in as well. We don't really have any. It looks really good. But notice how just adding a little white back there kind of help blend that back to the front, same as the front with the white. Really easy way to add some white with these effects if you didn't get enough out there. And then what we'll do is we'll just respray those spots that we hit with the isopropyl, and it'll help make that look more natural. There you have it. So what I can do now is take our denatured alcohol, and we're just gonna mist the whole surface, and this will help the surface fizzle since it's already starting to set up, and pop these bubbles that are in the resin because it's thick and we did the cardboard technique on it. You can see everywhere else we didn't do it, it doesn't have the bubbles. So just keep that in mind when you do that technique. You're gonna create bubbles, and usually the resin's too thick to pop on their own, so you're gonna have to mist it. So we're just misting the surface. So the majority of them pop, and then we'll just go and spot hit any other spots that are left. We got some that didn't pop. Just kind of spot hitting these now. So a lot easier than torching epoxy. We never torch our epoxy. You see how glass smooth this is laying out now. Counters are done, so I'm gonna show you how you test for the right time to pull the tape. Because if we pull the tape right now, the resin is gonna wind up flowing over too fast. It's gonna wanna drag that design off with it. It's gonna screw up the design. So we wanna keep this look, because it looks absolutely beautiful. So we're gonna let the resin set up. Right now, if I pull the tape back, see how fast it's moving? We'll lose a lot of resin on the floor. And again, when you do that, it's gonna pull the design and mess up the top. We don't wanna mess this up. So we're gonna let this set up, and it can take anywhere from depending on how long it took you to pour out or the temperatures, anywhere from a half an hour, 45 minutes, all the way up to 2 hours. So I'll show you guys when we pull the tape, the look you're going for. You want that resin to just slowly be moving down that edge, and that's about the perfect time to pull it, and we'll show you guys that when it's time. All right, so we're at the stage where we want to pull that tape. The resin's set up enough to where it's got a little sticky. It's not going to move as much. It's not going to pull that design off the top, and I'll kind of show you what we're looking for. So last time when I pulled the tape back, and it's been about an hour, hour and a half. Now it's slowly moving down. That's what we're looking for. Slowly moving. So it's the perfect time to pull the tape. So what we'll do is we'll just tear it. Anywhere you want to start is fine. And then we're just going to pull it off. Can get a little messy, so make sure you got your gloves on. And notice how it's right at the top now. By the time we get back here, it's probably be halfway down the face. Notice how we're not pulling the primer off from the tape. That primer has dried under the tape, not creating any issues. It's a benefit of using our primer. It bonds extremely well and dries fast. And just like I said, so just pulled that, and we pulled that, I don't know, 20 seconds ago, and it's already halfway down the edge. So we'll continue pulling all of it, and then we'll come back and rub in any spots that haven't been coated with epoxy to help that glide over the edge. You can see, so we had a little blowout here in the sink. Resin ran through, and you can see how it dragged the product. That's why we leave the tape on to set up, so it doesn't affect our design that we have. So some spots will wind up coating the edges more, like right here, right? It might have been a little thicker just in that area. But what we want to do now is just run our hands and brush in everywhere with resin. Make sure we get resin on the whole edge, and that's going to let it flow over nice and evenly. And don't worry about screwing the design up, because this is going to flow over the edge for another half an hour, 45 minutes. So you're going to get that top to come over still. Now if we have a spot that is already down to the bottom, like this one's pretty close, you don't need to brush the whole thing in. We can just work on the bottom edge. We don't have to hit the whole edge, just the spots that are missing. And using your hands, the easiest way to do it, because the resin is a little sticky. So just rub that back and forth, get it coated, and you'll see in about 10-15 minutes these edges will look natural, just like if you were to cut it out of a slab of granite or stone. Now this spot is dripping faster. We had a blowout when we flooded the counter, so it sloped a little right here. So we might get a little pull here, but you typically won't deal with that unless you're coating counters over and over like we are. Typical counters are relatively flat, but that's the only spot that we had an issue with, so that might run just a tad there, but it should be all right. So this is where we brushed in, where we started. It's already coming down the face, looking really awesome, bringing those veins down. And the cool thing about these Leggari Stone Kits in the process is your veins will come down crooked. They won't come down exactly straight like if you're doing a standard kit or most epoxy counters. Letting it set up like this will keep those crooked veins coming down the face, which really creates that natural look. So notice I'm not touching the top at all. We don't want to touch the top. If we need to get product somewhere, maybe there wasn't enough resin, we can do it where it was dripping, put that back on the counter, just on the edges. Might let this one drip a little bit more. So see, we lost a lot of resin right here that dripped down in the plastic from the bleed mark in the tape. So there's not very much coming over here, which is okay. I'll just kind of push resin from other sides of the top. Get as much on there, and then I can even use what's in there to put on the edge as well. Now that we got the tape pulled, our edges are all finished off with resin. I'm gonna go over scraping your drips. Now, it's obviously too early to scrape them. They're still gonna drip, but I can at least show you guys how to do that. You wanna keep in mind, if you guys are doing Leggari effects or spray paints or anything in the epoxy, you wanna top coat that to lock that into the top. We don't want that on the surface ever. So anytime you're using those effects, spray paint, stuff like that, make sure you do a top coat, either our urethane or our glaze coat. And we have a top coat for any preference, gloss, matte, glass smooth, we have it. So other thing I want to tell you is dispersing effects. When you're spraying the isopropyl, sometimes you can get some pinholes or surface tension where it pushes the epoxy away, and it usually happens in really thin areas, like mainly on your edges. If it goes down to the primer, don't assume that it'll level out. Just tap it in with your finger, and you want to hit those right away when you see them. But typical stone kits, Leggari Stone Kits, you don't have that because the resin's so thick. But every once in a while, someone will run into that. Just pat that in with your finger, and that'll eliminate that. So what I have here is a paint stick. I like to use a paint stick when it's more fluid, dripping off, like maybe right now. And then when it starts to set up and get sticky to where it's barely dripping, but you have drips on the bottom, take like a putty knife, something that's sharper, and you can kind of cut that off, because what'll happen is if you run a paint stick or something wide, it'll start to build up on the edge and actually add resin back onto the bottom edge. So you don't want to do that. So I'll kind of show you the process. So we'll do this one with the paint stick. And you can see it kind of built up an edge there. See how it's leaving resin behind right here? To eliminate that, we take a sharp blade and we basically, it's almost like you're cutting it off. See how it's not building up? It's just falling off. So when it starts to set up, you want to switch from a paint stick and use something sharp, putty knife, anything like that, and we're just running this on the bottom of the counter, and that's going to get rid of all our thick resin underneath there and the drips. Now, if you couldn't wait around and you had drips the next day, you can take 80 grit, 100 grit sandpaper, palm sander, and you can sand those flat before you top coat. That's not a problem at all. So this will still drip because it's pretty early in the process still, so you periodically want to check your drips every half hour, 45 minutes, and it'll get to the point where it's just really sticky, doesn't drip anymore. You do your final scrape, and then you shouldn't have drips the next day, and then you can apply your top coat. With the world's largest database of epoxy tutorials on actual projects, you'll be sure to find the look or color for your space. With thousands of countertop and floor kits installed by DIYers and professionals from all over the world, you can coat with confidence and know our products will last for years in any setting.